We're going to be using SUPABASE OAuth to log in with GitHub. Let's do it. So right here I have a very basic Next.js app. You want the code, GitHub links in the description. So right here we have the home page. You're going to be able to see this if you're logged in or not logged in. Protected route. You're only going to be able to see this if you're logged in. And then right here we have the login screen. And when we are logged in, instead of the login button, it's going to show the sign out button. If you want this little emblem right here, go over to Viral UI, find my profile right here with social icons, click this button, then you come into your project, paste that in just like Shad CN UI, and then it's going to automatically add this to the components/UI folder in your project. The link for that's in the description. So the first thing we're going to want to do is set up a SUPABASE project. So we're going to come over here, new project. I'm going to call this SUPABASE OAuth tutorial. We're going to generate a password. You're going to want to copy this for the auth. You don't need it, but if you're using the database, you do need it. So we're going to create new project. And then we're going to come into project settings. We're going to go to database. And then we're going to get the non-public. We're going to copy that, come over to create a .env.local file. And this is going to be our SUPABASE anon key. And then the SUPABASE URL is right here. So we're going to copy that, paste that in. Don't let anyone see this. So now that we got that set up, we're going to come over here to these docs, the links in the description, and we're going to install these packages right here. So I use pnpm. So I'm going to say pnpm add, paste that in. I've already got them, so nothing's going to change. So once we have those, we're going to scroll down here a little bit. We've already done this. And this thing, these docs say use next public. Don't do that because this is going to expose these keys to the client. Anyone's going to be able to see this. So anyone could take your keys and just create users in your database. So don't use next public. As you can see right here, we do not use next public. So this is only going to be used on the server. And that's exactly what this code is. That is for the client. We're going to be using the server. So we come in here, we can copy this code. We're going to come back to our project and we're going to create a new file. We're going to create a lib folder and we're going to call this auth.ts. And then this code that we just copied, we can paste that in. And we're going to make a few changes to it. So first thing we got to do is get rid of this next public, and we can get rid of these comments right here and right here. And I'm going to say const SUPABASE client equals this. And then I'm going to return SUPABASE client dot auth. And then I'm going to rename this to get SUPABASE auth. And so this is going to return this auth object, and you can see right here, this is going to give us some methods. Sign in with OAuth, which we will do in a little bit. And we're going to also use this function to create another function that we'll need called get user, which is going to be async. And this is going to be const auth equals get SUPABASE auth. And then const user is going to equal await auth.getUser. You got to wrap this in these parentheses and then .data.user, and we're going to return the user. And so we're going to use this function to determine whether or not the user is logged in. So now that we have this function, we can come over here to components, come in here to header, and we can turn this into an async function. And we can say const user equals await get user. And we can import that. And so now we have this user function. So we can come right here and we can create a div, and we're going to say, if there's a user, we're going to say logged in as, and we're going to say user.email. Otherwise, we're just going to say not logged in. And then we're going to add a little styling to this. We'll say absolute, and we'll say right for. And so now you can see over here, we're not logged in. If we comment this out and say user equals true, it's going to say logged in as undefined, obviously, because there's no email. So now we're going to set up this login function. So we'll come over here to the login page, and you can see it's a very basic page. So we'll come over here to login button, and we're going to set this up. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to use a transition. So you're going to want to import this from React. And this gives us is pending and start transition. So the is pending is while we're logging in, this is pending is going to be true. So we can create a few loading states. And then the start transition, we're going to use like this. Start transition. We're going to say async. And we're going to have a callback function in here. And now we write all of our logic in here. So we're going to say const error message, comma URL. And we're going to get this from await login action, which we're going to set up in a second. And then the way that this OAuth function works, we have to pass in a provider. So we're going to, this function is going to expect a provider. And we get this type from this SUPABASE library that we already imported. And so now we need to pass this in. And if you click Control Space, it'll show you all of the different ones you can use. We're going to use GitHub. So now this function, we're going to get the provider and we're going to pass this into login action. And so once we set up this function, we're going to do something with the error message and the URL. First, let's write this function. So we're going to come over here and we're going to create a new file in the actions folder called users.ts. And so we're going to write some server actions in here. So you have to say use server at the top. And then we're going to say export const login action, which is going to be an async function. And it's going to expect the provider. And we again import this type. And we're going to wrap this in a try catch block. If there's an error, we'll just return error message. And we'll just say error logging in. You're going to want to make that a little bit better in a production app, but for this, we'll just keep it simple. So up here, we're going to destructure data and error from the await get SUPABASE auth function that we wrote. And then from this, we're going to say sign in with OAuth. And then we're going to pass in an object right here. It's going to want the provider and then options. And we're going to say redirect to, and then we're going to pass in whatever we want. So this is going to be our next public base URL. So come in here to .env.local and add this. And when you actually use this in production, you're going to want to change this environment variable to whatever your website is. And so basically how this works is when we click log in, it's going to run this function. The sign in with OAuth is going to return a SUPABASE URL, which handles the login. And then with that is the URL that we want that I'm going to set up in a second. We have to create an API endpoint that handles some things. And we'll get to that in a second. So for this, we're going to say if error, throw error. And then if there's no error, we're going to return error message null, and then the URL, which is data.url. We get this from this data right here. So now we come back to login button and we can import this function. And so now we can say if there's not an error message and there's a URL, we can say router.push the URL. And so now we have to come up here. We have to say const router equals use router, import this from next navigation. And then we come down here and we say else, and we'll say toast dot error, the error message. And we're going to want to import that. And so I also added React hot toast. If you want to do that, just say pnpm add React hot toast or npm I React hot toast. You add that, and then you come over here to app layout. And you just put this toaster right here, which we get from React Hot Toast, inside of the body. And now you'll be able to use this toast anywhere in your project as long as it's a client component. So now all this code is set up. We're just going to add this is pending to a few things. We're going to say this is disabled if it is pending. And then right here, we're going to change this to is pending logging in. Otherwise, it's going to say log in with GitHub. So in order for this to work, we need to set a few things up. So we're going to come over here to SUPABASE and we're going to click authentication. And then we're going to say providers. So email is already set up. And then we're going to come here to GitHub, GitHub enabled. And now you can see we need the client ID and the client secret. So we're going to come over here to GitHub. We're going to click our user. We're going to come down to settings. Then we're going to scroll down to developer settings. We're going to go to OAuth apps, and we're going to create a new OAuth app. Then you're going to name this whatever you want. I'm going to say SUPABASE OAuth tutorial. And the homepage URL is going to be whatever it is. For right now, I'm just going to use localhost. And then this authorization callback URL, if we come back to Supabase, that's exactly what this is right here. So we're going to copy this, and then we're going to paste this in right here, and then we're going to register our application. So now this is ready to go. So what we're going to do is copy this client ID, come into here, paste that, and then we're going to generate a new client secret, and then we're going to copy that and then paste it in right here, and we're going to save this. And so now we're going to come over here to URL configuration. This part is very important. So because I'm using this in the local host, this is correct. Let's say you have an actual website. You're going to want to make this your actual website. But I had this bug that took me a long time to figure out. This is what I was using. viralui.com. Wasn't working. If you come over here to Vercel, where I have this deployed, and I come to domains, you can see I have viralui.com, but this redirects to www.viralui.com. So in here, if I use just https viralui.com, I was getting this error, a permanent redirect error. So you need to make sure to do www. And that's only if you have it set up like this. Now for this tutorial, we're just going to be using the local host. And so now, if we did this correctly, we should be able to log in. So if we come here, we say log in with GitHub, authorize, we're being redirected. It doesn't work. That's because we have to come to this documentation right here, which is in the description, scroll down, go to GitHub, and this explains everything I just set up on the GitHub, and it also explains how to set up all of these. So if you want to know how to do it, go to these docs right here. So we're going to scroll down, and we're going to have to create this API endpoint that I was talking about. So how this works is this URL that it sends us, this data.url, is this URL right here that we have in the GitHub Supabase thing. And then within this URL, it knows in this code, because we set up in this code right here, after you go to this URL, you then go to this URL. So we have to set up this right here. So we have to come into app, and we're going to create a new file, which is going to be API/auth/route.ts. And so now in this file, come back to these docs right here. We can simply copy this and paste it in. And we have to, this says next public right here. So we have to get rid of both of these. And so now this should work. The one thing you're going to want to do is return. So if an error occurs, this is where it's going to send them to. It's going to send them to our website /auth/auth code error, which we have not created that. So for now, I'm just going to get rid of this. It's just going to send us to, actually, we'll send it to the login page if an error occurs. So now, if we did everything correctly, so you can see we're not logged in. We go to login with GitHub. This now works correctly. And you can see logged in as with my GitHub email. And so now we want to be able to log out. And this is getting in the way, so I'm going to change this really quick. So I'm going to go to header, and I'm just going to simply change this to logged in. So if we go over to the login page right here, we're going to say const user equals await get user. We're going to import that. And then we're going to say if there's a user, we're going to have a sign out button, which we are about to create. Otherwise, show this login button. And we have to make sure to wrap this in a fragment. So now we come into components, new file, and we'll say sign out button.tsx. And this is going to be very similar to our login button. So come to the login button, copy all that, come into the sign out, paste it, change this login button to sign out button, and then change this to, instead of login with GitHub, it's going to say sign out, and then it's going to say signing out. And then we're going to change the name of this function to handle click sign out button. And then this is not going to accept a provider, so we're going to get rid of that. This is not going to return a URL, so we can get rid of this. We can get rid of this. And if there's no error message, we can say toast.success. And we'll change this to successfully signed out. And we're going to get rid of that. And then instead of log out or instead of log in action, we're going to say sign out action. So now we can go back into our users actions and we can say export const sign out action. It's going to be an async function, and we can copy this code right here, paste it in, and then instead of this sign in, we're going to say sign out. And then this is just simply going to return the error. And we're going to say if error, throw the error. We're just going to return error message of null if it works correctly. And then we're going to say error signing out. And so now we come back to our sign out button and we import the sign out action. And then we come back to our login page and we import this component. And so now you can see we're logged in. I want to change that as well. The sign out button, get rid of this GitHub icon. And so now we're logged in. It says sign out. We click sign out, successfully signed out, and it says not logged in. We can log back in. And you can see we're logged in. If we come to the login page, it has the sign out. We can also come up here and remove these unused things. So now I'm going to show you how to set up a protected route. You will only be able to go to this route if you are logged in. And we're going to use that using middleware. So we're going to come in here to the source directory and we're going to create a new file and we're going to call it middleware.ts. You have to make sure this is spelled correctly. I've spelled it wrong before and it took a long time to figure out what was wrong. So what we're going to do is come back into the SUPABASE docs, the setting up server-side auth, and we're going to scroll down. And right here, this thing says middleware.ts. So we can copy this code right here, paste it in, and then the way they have it set up is they have this update session in another file, which I don't like. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste this right here. And so I'm going to take these imports and I'm going to move them to the top right here. And then this thing that says update session, I'm going to change this to get user. And this is going to take in a request and a response of type next response. And we're going to remove this right here. And we also have to remember to, instead of this next public, we have to remove these. And then we scroll down. And instead of this, we're going to return parentheses await supabase.auth.getUser. And then outside of the parentheses, we're going to say data.user. And so now up here, we can get rid of all of this and we can remove this. And then we can come into here, copy this response right here, paste that into the main middleware function. And then we're going to say const path equals new URL request.url.pathname. And so this is going to give us, so right here, this would return / protected route. Right here, this would return, if it was on the home page, it would just return / nothing. And then we're going to say const user equals await get user. And then we have to pass in the request and the response. And then we're going to say if path equals / protected route and there is not a user, we're going to return a next response dot redirect. And this is going to be a new URL. It's going to be /login. And then we're going to say request.url. And then if that doesn't happen, we're just going to return the response. So basically what's happening here is if the path is protected route and we're not logged in, we're going to redirect the user to the login page. If this is not the case, we're just going to return the response. So we are logged in. We go to the protected route. It works. Now, if we sign out, We go to the home page, works fine. We go to the login page, works fine. We go to the protected route. It's going to redirect us to the login page. So let's go home, protected route, takes us to the login page. Log back in. Now we go to the protected route. Boom, works like a charm. So there you have it. If you learned something, subscribe. If you want to learn how to manage users in SUPABASE, watch this video right here. See you next time.